So, hola, hello everyone. So, welcome to the forklift planning session. Um, First, I've pasted here in the chat window of this meeting the resources I'm using, like the slides. I'm pasting them again because if you get out, you don't have the history. So you have in there the slides. We're going to use a mirror board to capture feedback. Of course, we would like to listen to you, which is more important than adding it there. But if you add it there, it will be a lot easier later on to collect it. So let me go through the materials. We have these. I'm going to use this slide as the conducting thread for this session, and then we have this mirror board, and in here you'll see that we have all the slides here under. It's not tackle, it's forklift. Okay, sorry. So you have here all the slides that we're going to use. Can zoom in, and of course, if there's anything that is like, hey, this should be this, or this should be that, or I like it, or I don't like it, and why, especially why, then of course you could put in here any comment. I have put some sticky notes here, so you just have to pick it up and use it, okay? So they're already there for you to be able to provide feedback, and of course interrupt me at any time to provide your comments. So once said that, I'm going to start with the slides. So first things first, what is the community? This is a community of people
Miguel, you're
passionate
not
about.
sharing your screen.
Am I not sharing my screen so far? Really? And you waited that long to say it?
I wasn't sure,
Okay,
man.
okay. Let me go back here. Okay, let me know when you see my screen. I thought I was sharing my screen.
Now
Okay.
you are. Now you are.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone. So, okay, so this is the mirror board. Okay. Now you can see it, and you have here the post-it notes, and you have here all the slides. So feel free to grab a post-it note, move it here, and add your comments to it, and of course interrupt me at any time. Now that you're seeing it, I think it's more clear, right? So now these are the slides. Of course, I pasted their link just in case you want to go move back and forward. And of course, the roadmap. First things first, as I said, Conveyor is a community of people that is about helping others modernize and migrate applications to the hybrid cloud. What do? We build tools. We capture feedback from what is being done in the field to migrate applications and other workloads, and how to adopt containers. And the main goal is bringing things to Kubernetes in a way that makes sense. So let's bring things to Kubernetes. So we have these tools, Forklift, which is the one I'm going to talk about, to rehost virtual machines to Kubernetes, Crane to rehost applications between Kubernetes clusters as containers, then move to Kube to replatform applications from, let's say, Cloud Foundry to Kubernetes, Tackle to refactor applications, analyze them, assess them, and be able to move them to Kubernetes in a way that they are properly adapted to the new environment, and Belarus, that is to measure the delivery performance with the main metrics. So about the roadmap, what are we doing before we get into the roadmap? We're bringing virtual machines from VMware into Kubernetes. We're working on adding, being able to move from overt, which it has a downstream version of it, which is called Red Hat virtualization, into Kubernetes, and from Openstack into Kubernetes. So we're going to follow this order. We have started with VMware, then we're going to move to overt and Red Hat virtualization, and then we're going to move to OpenStack. and we want to run them in Kubernetes with KubeVirt and as virtual machines. And that means, I mean, OpenShift has distribution of Kubernetes, which is what we're using to test, and we're running KubeVirt in OpenShift to be able to run these virtual machines. So this is the target platform. This is the source. As in every migration or modernization, there's a source and a target, and this is what we're doing in the Forklift roadmap. By the way, there's a new website, which is forklift.conveyor.io, just in case you want to visit it or share it with anyone. So this is what Forklift is about. Some videos I mean, they're done using OpenShift and the downstream version of Forklift. However, I think they're good to get started. And of course, this is on GitHub. So if you want to propose any change to the website, you just go here and you could edit, for example, index MD and submit a pull request. We're trying to do everything in the open as possible. So we are waiting for you to come with your feedback and your suggestions and your pull request issues or whatever you want to bring to contribute. An overview on the roadmap. Okay, so where are we now? We have released version 2.0 beta in March. And we are working on version 2.0, which is due to release soon. I expect next week we'll be able to have it, if possible, early next week. But I mean, we are having a couple of bumps in the road, and we are working on them. So yeah, I think by next week we'll have for the Forklift 2.0. So expect it in your operator hub, in your Kubernetes distribution, to be able to use it as an operator. So what have we prepared for this version? First thing is the warm migration. Okay, the warm migration is a way to copy data from the VMs while they are running. This is being done using a capability called CBT, continuous block tracking, that is available in VMware vSphere. That enables, for example, it's used also for backups. So it's pretty straightforward. We're using the same mechanisms as for backups. And what we are doing is that we're using that to copy the data first. Once the data is copied, the machine, of course, will generate changes, and those changes will go to the disk drive. And then when you shut down the machine, you'll be able to track the changes that were done, and you will be able to copy only the changes. What is the goal of this? Is to, normally when you migrate VMs, you need to request an intervention window. So you can shut down the VMs at some point in time. And you want to be able to first make it as short as possible. So being able to shut it down, copy just the delta, and then power up is one way to make it shorter and faster. And second, I mean, in every intervention window, you will want to migrate as many VMs as possible. So it helps also there. So this is one of the things we have been working on. Second thing is the validation service. We are using a component called Open Policy Agent for the validation service. And we already have some rules from a previous project called Project Xavier, which meant we had a tool called Migration Analytics. By the way, Migration Analytics is right now deprecated. It's not in use, it's an off-life. But we're reusing all the rules that we had in Migration Analytics to detect possible issues in the VM, only in the part of the VM that is defined in the virtualization platform. So we are not yet introspecting into the VM, but we are gathering all the data that the virtualization platform is providing about the VM and using it to understand if that VM could or could not be migrated. So these are like the main features. Of course, there are other more tactical features, smaller features that are being implemented in every version. So for Forklift 2.1, what we are planning to do is to add ref as a source provider called migration, and then include what we call migration hooks, which is a way to automate some tasks before or after migration. It's a mechanism to be able to use a container to perform these tasks, and also a way to use Ansible playbooks in a container to run these tasks. This task could be related to the VM itself if you want to remove any software before doing the migration or perform any changes to the VM itself, like modifying a file system or adding files or removing software or adding software, or also to the infrastructure around the VM, like a DNS, a load balancer, or if it belongs to a cluster, the cluster itself, monitoring, and any other service that is around the VM. So migration hooks, we expect them to be very important when it comes to automating the full migration process and the integrations that the VM has with the rest of the environment. Then this is what we have planned. Again, these are the main parts. We would like to know your feedback on this. So feel free to, again, grab a Post-it note in the Miro board and copy it or move it and add your comments there. So 2.2 for November this year is about adding more migration to rehabilitation and preparing a hooks image builder for Ansible hooks. So if you want to use Ansible as a way to perform automation of the changes to be done before or after the migration, we'll provide a way to create images that you can use for this. So you will only need a Git repository with your playbooks. So this builder will gather that Git repository, build an image for you, and you'll be able to use this image in the migration, ensuring that you always have the same image, the same playbooks, the same configuration during the whole migration process, and you could even reuse it and knowing that there's no changes applied to it. And also the validation service, we want to make it GA by November 2021, and it will be included in 2.2. And then 2.3 is about OpenStack. It's about adding OpenStack and adding code migration to OpenStack. So this is more or less the overview. Any comments so far?
Yeah, Miguel, quick question. This is Vince. Why is the validation service only being called Tech Preview at this point?
Oh, yes, the way we're doing, if I recall correctly, and Daniel may need to correct me, okay? The way we're doing tests to the validation service and the rules that we have in the validation service, I mean, we can test it, and we are doing tests to it, but we would like to have more real-world tests, you know? So we want the validation service first to go through some real-world scenarios and be able to check that the rules are the ones that we prepared, that we expect them to run nicely, but we want to be sure that they're running nicely. You know, it's a validation service. And we want to have some real-world contact. Take into account that, I mean, this tool hasn't been used a lot in the public, and right now we are looking forward doing some real-world migrations with real-world environments, and we have done it in every environment that we found that we could test it on. But so far, we need to get started and be able to do some initial migrations. So the validation service, again, we want to just test drive it in real world before saying it's EA.
Okay, so no new features, hopefully, just testing.
Well, probably new rules in the same capability. Take into account that if we find something that it makes the migration cumbersome, difficult, or even impossible, I mean, we could add a rule there, and then it will increase the number of cases that are detected. So that's the idea. Of course, if anybody finds something in the that is recommended to go into the validation service, please reach me and share it with me, because I would love to check that we have as many important rules as possible in the validation service.
Got it. Thanks, Miguel.
Thanks for the question, Vince. Any other question? Okay, moving on. So this is how the roadmap looks like in a time frame. You see that, I mean, we plan to do like more or less 4 releases a year. So still, I mean, again, this is the first release we want to do, and it's going to I mean, we are assembling all the pieces of how we build, how we do things, and how we work. But we expect to be able to do like 4 releases a year. So right now, this is our plan, and this is the cadence that you can expect. This is tentative again, but it looks like it's. I mean, we have done all the homework that we could to be able to be as sure as possible that these dates are more or less okay. Of course, we are depending on many factors to be able to reach this, but I mean, we are providing some good estimates, I expect, so you can know when to expect the features to come. On the engineering pillars, we defined the engineering pillars in the previous planning meeting, and here they are. I think it's important to go through them because it shows, I mean, what are we, it's not just what do we want to do, but how do we want to do it, what is important. So the first part is reliability and performance, okay? We need to make this tool predictable. I mean, people are moving VMs. VMs are managing any kind of workload, and even if they are very different one from the other, and they're like snowflakes, you know, each one has its own things. We need to try to do the tool as predictable as possible, you know, to make it as reliable as possible, so it will move the VM properly. Then maybe you will require some adaptation to the VM in order to run in the target platform, but we would like to make this tool as reliable as possible, and we're focused on that. So we are putting a lot of effort in making it reliable and also performant. We want to be able to do like larger scale migrations in short periods of time. So there's a lot of investment in being able to parallelize the conversion of the disks in the source VMs into the target VMs, so we could maximize the throughput and use the network properly and reduce the time required for each migration, and also increase the number of migrations in the same intervention window. So these are the two most things, you know. We would like to cover as many migration cases as possible. For that, we're asking for your cooperation. So any migration case that you think is interesting, that you think it could be repeatable, that could provide some benefits to other users that are using the tool, I mean, I would love to hear about those. So feel free to reach me or reach us. And I mean, we are in the Kubernetes Slack space in the conveyor channel, and I mean, I would love to hear about the migration cases that you think would be interesting to be able to cover and to migrate. Again, we are focused on the migration tool, on how to migrate from A to B, not so much on the migration target. Okay, there are other channels to talk about KubeVirt and the capabilities in KubeVirt. So even if we're going to be in those other channels, I mean, if you're contacting through conveyor channel to talk about migration cases, it would be a lot more useful if I mean, we discuss about which kind of workload are we migrating, why it's important to migrate, what are the steps that it will take to migrate it confidently, and so on. So pillar number 2 is to have clear error messages. You know, we're going to find many weird cases. I expect it. I mean, I've been in enough customers and working in their virtualization environments to know that we're going to find many weird cases, and we need to be able to, I mean, and we're not going to be able to migrate everything. We know that. But if we provide a clearer message on what is the issue, it will help a lot the user. It will help a lot in being able to know, okay, what is going on in here, and it will help the user help himself or herself and solve the issues faster, and avoiding having to open a bug or a case. So if the user needs to open a case or a bug, okay, it's great that they do it. But if we can provide clear error messages, that's very important. And in this case, I think it's especially important because I mean, you want to complete the migration, you want to move the workloads, you want to have them in the target platform, and being able to start the troubleshooting with a clear indication on where the issue is coming from is important to be able to do it. Also, we are talking about migrating during intervention windows, which means that you do have normally a very reduced amount of time to do things. So you really need at in those moments to have the most clear recommendations possible whenever something is not going as expected. So third point, reduce downtime. We need to reduce downtime. We need to reduce the time required for migrations, which means, of course, doing things like board migration whenever possible, and also making it very performant and to be able to reduce downtime. This is very linked to number one, and again, the more VMs we can move in 1 hour, the better. And for adding more sources, so right now we have VMware, but we want to add more sources. Any place that is a source for a VM migration that would make sense to move the VM from is welcome. Right now we have started with VMware because of the footprint. We are taking in step number 2, Red Hat virtualization, mainly because I mean it's going end of life, and we want to help customers migrate from it, and will be, I mean, it's still a lot of years ahead, but we want to provide this option as early as possible. And then, of course, Openstack. Many customers using Openstack, many flavors of Openstack. So they may be using it for development purposes, like an environment to provide resources to developers to try their stuff, but developers are moving the containers. And even if they're not transforming initially the workload into containers, they would want to migrate those VMs into OpenShift, mainly because OpenShift provides already quite a lot of features that are used for containers that can also be used for virtual machines. Like, for example, you have Tecton CI/CD pipelines that you could reuse with virtual machines, or include virtual machines in your pipelines, not just containers. So you could bring your workloads as they are. Sometimes it's because you're using a very old version of software that is not available anymore, or that is built with code that is not available, and you still want to keep it, but you want to link it from other applications. So these kind of cases are very important to be able to move the applications to OpenShift virtualization. So adding sources for the workloads is the number 4 pillars. So any question or comment on these pillars? Would you add a 5th pillar? And if so, what would be it?
Miguel, I posted this in the conveyor chat, but I think one of the important things that we've heard this week is that folks are interested in being able to make sure the sizing of the VMs is correct or accurate or efficient. So meaning that as we migrate to KubeVirt, we want to maintain as much consistency between the source VM and the destination VM. So we don't want to, for example, we had some efficiencies inside of IMS where we weren't migrating disk space that was unusable or didn't have any content, for example. So, being able to size or resize some of that, I think, is a huge opportunity for us. It's not an easy problem to solve, but just wanted to throw that out there as a possible roadmap item.
So I was going to answer directly in the chat, but I've got an opportunity now. So from the CPU and memory, it's fairly easy to change on the fly. The main thing is how do we design the user experience for that? I mean, currently the plan is basically creating a mapping between source and destination network or storage, setting a list of VMs and creating the plan. If we need to add additional fields to allow the user to set the CPU and memory VM by VM, it can be cumbersome. So that's a balance we need to find. The other aspect is the storage, and you mentioned it. So it's already optimized right now from a transfer point of view. So we are already checking the zeroed blocks on the VMware side, and we don't transfer them. And on the destination, we are using sparse storage. So we are not writing zeros on the destination disk. So it's efficient from a copy point of view. It doesn't mean that the allocation on the destination is efficient. It mainly depends on the storage backend that we have. And there was a question yesterday about the ability to resize the disk during the migration. Like basically, people were a bit this over allocation on the VM created a 100 gig disk on VMware and realized that in the end they were using 20 gigs only. So they would like to resize the disk to 30, for example, keeping some room. The problem with that is we need to go inside the VM and resize all the layers to the file system. And doing that on the fly there's a huge risk of corruption of the disk. So the main thing we could look at is sparsification, making sure that on the disk we're not using thick allocation. Resizing is going to be an R&D challenge. Something absolutely to take to Richard Jones or the lead guest FS team.
Okay, so I mean, we have a slide for that later on, so we could revisit it more in depth. But would you add any engineering pillar to this? Are these okay to you?
They are.
Okay, good. So I'm moving on. So early access program.
Yes.
Go, shoot.
They are kind of ordered by priority, or all of them are the same priority?
They are ordered by priority.
Okay.
Would you change it?
No, I agree with your priorities. I just wanted to make sure that it's indeed the priority. I don't know, maybe more sources should be a little bit more priority rather than reduce downtime, because it's like the main functionality. But
so
okay.
Would you add OpenStack source before adding born migration for web habitualization and overt?
Maybe, yeah, maybe, but it's like it's a question for okay. For example, when we were working on IMS, indeed we first added the OpenStack, and only later we started working on warm migration.
Yeah.
From Rev or from so indeed we first focused on more sources, and then we started doing the other things. But this is something that should be dictated by the customer need. I don't know.
So the feedback I've got so far on this is that we expect that migrations from web habitualization are going to happen at some point in time, and there's going to be like a quite large number of VMs to be migrated. Whereas we do not expect so many migrations coming from OpenStack initially, okay? Maybe when OpenStack 13 goes end of life and customers are considering moving to OpenStack 16 is when they may consider, hey, if we have to move these workloads, why not, instead of moving them to a new version of OpenStack, we move them to OpenShift virtualization. So that's why the order is like this. I mean, that was the reasoning behind it. So I was challenging my own reasoning to say, was it okay? But it seems that, I mean, right now, the priority, and it's something we considered, and I even talked to friends in the OpenStack team. It's like, no. First, let's focus on bringing as many VMs from overt and virtualization to OpenShift and KubeVirt as possible, mainly because of the dates in which I mean the number of VMs that we could expect to be migrated, and the expectations we have from those sources. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Would you keep it as it is after this?
Michael? Miguel, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. It just I think the title of number one is a bit confusing, because maybe it should be scalability, because the reduced downtime is a performance kind of sub issue. I will put under the same umbrella unless we change the title. You know, scalability and performance are maybe things that goes in parallel. I don't know if that makes sense.
I like it a lot. I'm going to add it here. How did you call it?
Scalability.
Yeah, usually it goes together, scalability together with performance, scale and performance. Like, you know, usually performance is important on scale. There is less issue with having performance on like smaller scale, like one VM. But yeah, you're right.
Okay. Noted. Good one. Thank you. So more information. We are starting an early access program to reach real world use cases, to be able to use the tool with real world scenarios and with help from the field team in our team in the cloud platforms business unit. So we're going to be able to reach this. If you have any customer that is interested in testing it, please reach me. So you could send me an email, and I will gladly help there in getting more feedback from the field. Also, capturing your feedback. I pasted here the board. I'm putting here the link to it, just in case you want to access it, and of course use the notes to add your comments in it. So we're going to divide this in three terms. You know, short term. I already mentioned this. You know, 1.1. We are already working on. Sorry, 2.1. We're already working on it, and it's 2.1 is. I mean, we already have the plan mostly done. I mean, we have some margin to change things, but these are the features where we're working on it. You know, upgrade from one version to other, smart throttling, call migration for ref, hooks, you know, leverage CNV PVC profiles, and as you could see, this is in issues.redhat.com, just in case you want to take a look at it. Sorry, here, okay, and in Slack, okay, and yeah, and again, we do not have a lot of margin to change things, but it would be good to hear your feedback to see if we are doing it in a way that you foresee as good. And then we already have started adding more epics into 2.2. So this is what we're doing for near term. Again, you see that the main goals are here, and the two main things that we would like to review is like the Ansible hooks image builder. Okay. So Fabian, do you want to go through this?
Yeah. So the idea of the hooks is to allow the user to have some freedom to include some changes in the flow. Like basically our flow is simple. We shut down the VM, which transfers the disk. We recreate a VM on the destination, and we start the VM again. So shutting down transfer can be switched depending on the fact that you're one migration, but basically that's it. The goal here is to provide a hook, and the hook will be, before we shut down the VM, we allow the user to run whatever they want so that they can change their environment. And after the migration, they can do the same. Like one usual example is removing the VM from the load balancer and re-adding the VM afterwards. We have already, well, in 2.1, we will have the options to use either whatever container image the customer has, which is complete freedom. The user is responsible for creating the container image, and we will run a pod with that image. So it puts all the effort on the user to create this image and maintain them. Or we have also an alternative to run an Ansible playbook through the Ansible runner container image. So here the user copy-paste the playbook in a text box. The playbook is added to the container image at runtime, and the playbook is run. This accounts for quite small playbooks or playbooks that are able to actually complete themselves by downloading additional roles or everything. What we are looking at is providing an additional layer on top of that, where the user has already an Ansible practice, usually storing the playbooks and the roles, even the plugins in Git, publishing them in an internal Ansible Galaxy. And from here, what we would like to do is help the user build images from those assets. Initially, we were thinking about creating the image on the fly. When the plan is run, we have an init container running alongside the Ansible runner, and it would pull anything that is needed at runtime. The challenge is reproducibility. It was pointed out, in all fairness, by the MCC team or the Crane team, that if the plan for some reason fails and we want to run it again, we don't want the image to be built at runtime, because the risk is the Git repo may have changed, the behavior might not be the same the second time, so all the VMs will not have had the same hook, and the behavior cannot be easily reproduced afterwards. So here what we're looking at is finding the balance between the ease of use of Git, Ansible Galaxy, and the reproducibility. Basically, we would provide a way, when creating the plan, to point to those assets in Git and Galaxy or whatever we see fit, and allow the user, and have a builder. So when the plan is created, we would build the image for the customer, store it in the registry, and keep it there until the plan is run. So when the plan runs, all the VMs will use that prepackaged image. So it's more about adding a level of user experience on top of the simple copy-paste playbook in the text area. And the goal, because we're using hooks that were already existing in the Crane project, is to contribute that to the common hooks repo, so that Crane can also leverage it if they want, or anyone else.
Thank you, Fabian. Any questions on this or any comments?
Yeah, I had a question, Fabian, just about the simplicity of this image builder, particularly given the users that might be using these tools, possibly coming from the world of virtualization. So they might be familiar with tools like vCenter or Rev Manager, those kind of tools. So for them to jump into the world of building and baking and deploying images, is that going to be something that's going to be difficult for them, or do you think it will be straightforward, or how can we help them to understand that change in working?
Yeah, the idea is from a user experience point of view, we wanted to make it as simple as pointing to a Git repo, and that Git repo would have the playbook. And if the requirements.yaml file is set correctly and is pointing to an internal galaxy, we would just run Ansible Galaxy install with the requirement file to build the image. Like something that if the user has already an Ansible practice, usually that's what we find. Very small playbooks that are actually calling roles, and the roles are referenced in requirements. So this can actually be built like an RPM. It's like the recipe for an RPM. So we are putting everything at once, and the user basically shouldn't have anything else to do.
Okay, thanks.
So the requirement will be that the user needs to know Ansible. Okay. So that I think is a fair requirement, right? And then it's like, okay, where do you put your playbooks? Here, okay, and then we pull those playbooks and the dependencies, and we build the image. And then when you're going to run the automation, you have to choose an image. So you can choose the one we built for you. Does that make sense?
Actually, yeah, and actually we focus on Ansible, and I think that's a fair question from a community point of view. We're focusing on Ansible, well, because we are Red Hat and we are coming from Ansible world, but there's nothing preventing the community to contribute the same kind of approach for other automation tools. I mean, running a container, basically what happens in the end is we're still running the container image, which is the level 1 of the hooks, taking whatever image the user is providing. So in this case, what we're doing is we are pre-building the image for them, simplifying the creation of the image. But if they have, let's say, a preference for Puppet, and Puppet can run inside a container for the same kind of feature, and they want to contribute the same kind of hooks mechanism to build a Puppet image with everything inside of it, it's actually, they can do it. In the end, we'll still run the image for them at runtime.
Any further comment?
Yeah, I have a question about the reproducibility. I mean, at the moment, the plan is to have the same hooks applied to all the virtual machines in the plan. But is there a plan to, so to speak, or on the roadmap to have different hooks for different virtual machines? Is that still on the targets down the road somewhere? Or?
No. I mean, if you want to run different playbooks for different virtual machines, you will have to use different plans. So right now, it's like you create a plan and you apply the same changes to all the VMs in the plan. But again, I mean, if we see that in the real world, like, okay, somebody's telling us, look, I will have to create like 100 plans because I will need to change these for virtual machine. Then, of course, we will consider it. But initially, the idea is that you run the same automation for the whole plan.
But maybe the playbook itself can be smarter with some cases. So if condition, for example, if you see, like, I don't know, I'm thinking renaming.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have, like, for example, if the VM has this kind of name, so you change the name to this name, which is good for OpenShift virtualization. So the playbook itself can be smart and do adjustable changes for each of the VMs. Make sense?
Yeah, that I mean, that's another approach, of course. Yeah. Okay. I'm moving on. Networking. Okay, how to configure network for migrated VMs. This is something we have been contacted about, and what to do with DPDK enabled interfaces. Okay, so there's some capability in CNV, container native virtualization, which is the core. I mean, is how KubeVirt is integrated into OpenShift, and we have seen this. DPDK, which enables SRIOV in network interfaces, and VMware has SRIOV. So first thing would be like, okay, first, how to detect SRIOV or DPDK enabled interfaces in VMware and be able to warn via the Open Policy agent that will be the validation service in Forklift. And second would be, okay, once we know how it works, will we be able to change it? So these are things that we need to consider when it comes to adapting the networking reconfiguration in the VMs and for these two cases. There are more things about networking in the network configuration, but these two cases, I mean, does any of you foresee these two cases happening? Like how to prepare first, how to change the fixed IP, second, how to migrate DPDK enabled interfaces? Okay, we'll see. So midterm. OpenStack code migration is the main thing in the midterm, and then we are adding things like the improvements to the provider verifications. Okay, how we can simplify the verifications of the provider fingerprints that we are having right now. Can we enable some checks before saving, and also some possible approaches, like validating a webhook. So if the provider could be rejected if the validation fails. So when we are adding a provider right now, we run some checks to it, and then we raise any issue that we find. So we could reject the provider if the validation fails. Could be tricky. And then a custom resource with a draft flag that creates a resource and a validation. And validation is done by the controller. The resource can be reloaded and modified by the UI, and there can be leftovers when the UI is closed. But again, so these are approaches to try to improve the verifications to how we add providers here. So my question here is like, are you seeing like many customers concerned on this level of security, or do you see them really validating fingerprints, and how we could validate those fingerprints to ensure that we are connecting to the right provider? Do you have any feedback here? Any comment? Okay, so if you have it, please drop a sticky note in the Miro board.
Miguel, if it's not validated, what is the impact?
Yeah, that's
if
a
we
good
don't
question.
have the enabled check before save.
So right now we are requesting the user to provide a fingerprint. The fingerprint has to be obtained by running an OpenSSL command in a Unix box or Linux box, anything with OpenSSL. You could even SSH into vCenter and run OpenSSL there to gather the fingerprint. The fingerprint ensures that there's no man in the middle. So it's important to ensure that you're connected to the right vCenter. So one of the things that we could do is that we could retrieve the fingerprint at some point in time before saving it, and it will show it to the user, and the user could verify it. So they would be more or less like the behavior of SSH. You know, when you connect to a new VM, and it shows you the fingerprint, and you could verify it, you know, before accepting it, and then you accept the key identifying the machine that you're connecting to, and then you go ahead. You know, the thing is that the way we're doing it right now, we are asking the user to go and get the fingerprint before being able to add a provider. What does it means? I mean, we right now have an import capability that doesn't request this. So if you were going to use the tool for something like casual, like I need to import 2-3 PMs, and you will have to do this kind of task that is requiring you to SSH into a vCenter, gather a fingerprint, copy it, paste it, and then be able to run it. I mean, it's quite cumbersome for something casual, in which that you just want to give it a go, you know, and it may block some people from using the tool, or may make them avoid using the tool. So the goal here is to ease this kind of task without losing it, so you can really be sure that you're doing the connection to the right appropriate vCenter. Does it make sense what I say?
Yeah. Also, I would add that if there was let's say if the user did this overhead and went and brought the fingerprint, and then he made some mistake.
Yeah.
Right. This
yeah.
is, and then as I remember, he's kind of gets blocked, just like he's not able to do nothing, and right.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah,
so,
and he actually, as I remember, he actually will just be aware of it when he will start migration. He will not be. He will fail only on later in the status, because we are not validating right away.
Yeah.
This is a pain point.
Mm-hmm. So this is one of the things we could try to improve for 2.3. Maybe, yeah, 2.3 would be like the right time frame. Another one, I don't know, Jill is here. Jill, if you're in the meeting, would you like to go through this one? Or Fabienne?
Yeah, I cannot go over this one. If you don't mind, Jill.
Please go ahead.
So the goal of what we call it OPAL, it's a prototype we've been doing, what Gilles has been implementing over the last 4 months now. The goal was to explore the data we have in the inventory from a different angle. So today, when you're using Forklift, you can have some information about the inventory on the provider page, where you can see the number of VMs, number of hosts, but you don't go into the details until you create a plan. And when you're creating a plan, the user experience is made for people who know exactly which VM they want to migrate. So they have a way to filter them. So if you've got 10,000 VMs, you can filter by host or cluster or by folder, which is convenient to reduce the amount of VMs you see on the next screen when you're doing the selection, like clicking on a checkbox to select the VM. But usually you need to know which VMs you want to migrate. Here, the approach was, how do I find VMs with common criteria? Also, how do I find what? And in the main UI, once you've selected your VM, you're going to see what are the concerns we have. So concerns are actually additional information based on the rules. Miguel mentioned that we have a validation service. Validation service is adding concerns for each VM in the inventory with a label, a category, so critical, information, warning, and a message. With that, you know it basically too late. When you've selected your VM, you need to go back and change if you've got one that is critical. So here, the idea is, with that UI, you would be exploring the data from the whole inventory. And one aspect is, we know that VMware customers are used to before trees they see in the vCenter UI. Host and cluster, VM and templates, storage and network. So Gilles has worked on implementing a GraphQL overlay on the inventory REST API so that we could do some traversal. So you've got the list of all the VMs, but from the VM, you can actually move to the data store by clicking on the disk. From the data store, you can move back to the hosts that are connected to that data store. So you can find your way in the graph. So we've got traversal, which is a good way to explore the data, but we also have search feature. Miguel has switched to the next slide, which is great because you can see the search part. We have a list of 10,000 VMs. How do I find the ones that I'm interested in? So in the screenshot, you can see that you can filter by many criteria. The first one is the power state, finding all the VMs that are off. There are good candidates for cold migration because if they're off, the warm migration doesn't really make sense. So they could be actually migrated silently without any maintenance window, for example. You also, Gilles has shown an example on the ID, but it could be the name, and you can have, you can use regular expression there to find the VMs. So another option is to search on the concerns. One thing is, for example, Miguel mentioned SRIOV. How do I find all the VM with SRIOV? Because we flag the VM that have SRIOV, we can find them. And from there, we can basically tell the customer, here is the number of VMs that are going to need SRIOV configuration in your OpenShift cluster. Do you have enough nodes configured to host them? That's a possibility. Or you're finding all the VMs that have a specific trait and that are not supported on OpenShift. So you can actually filter them out directly or identify the configuration that is missing on OpenShift or KubeVirt to actually allow them to migrate safely. And if you fix your destination platform, then those VMs are becoming green and you can do a migration. The next step is to allow creating plans. So once you've got a group of VM that have the same characteristics, you can put them into a plan and you go back into the plan creation wizard, but the selection is already done. So the next step is creating the mappings as usual and starting the plan. So it allows you to have another, a more exploratory way to find your VMs. The next step for the analytics on our side, and it's really for the midterm, so we still have time, and it's looking at making a production grade integration with the inventory data. It was a POC, was working well for POC, but there's surely room for improvement on performance side. Working on the user experience. Gilles has done a very great work at that. You can see it's slick. It follows most of the pattern fly patterns, but we surely can improve the user experience, finding opinionated views. And also we need to extend the inventory data model to cover more use cases. The more information that we've got in the inventory, the more accurate our filters can be. That's it on this feature. Any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Fabien. Thanks a lot.
I think it's cool. When do we plan this feature? For 2.2, 2.3?
2.1. No, just kidding.
Already released. Yeah, next week.
Next week. Yeah, no. I mean, it's this is as I said in the very beginning. This is like 2.3. 2.3 is more or less what is here in midterm. You know. This is for consideration. So also,
how are those? Is there any thinking around the analytics and how it can be shared between multiple projects?
Yes.
There's a slide. There's a slide about it.
Yeah. I'm glad to bring that up, James. So moving ahead, doing some introspection. you know. So we are limited to the infrastructure. We're limited to the virtualization infrastructure, and I mean, we could gather information like we did in previous tools that we built, you know, to know what is inside the VM, and there's a proof of concept for it. Fabian, do you want to talk about this one? I mean, I think you love it. Me too, but you could provide more insights here. Do you want to?
Yeah, I can. So the idea is quite old when we were looking at how CloudForms was doing smart state analysis and how we could extend that. The idea here is to leverage the same library we use for the data transfer, but instead of transferring the disk, we can mount the disk either directly in read-only mode or from a snapshot. And because we mount the disks of the VM, we can actually look at what's inside the VM. So install software, configuration files, even application files if we know where to look for. So this tool is fairly simple. You give it a number of paths where to look for information, some patterns, and it's highly configurable. The configuration could be a YAML or a JSON file, and it's just going to grab the information once the disk is mounted and store it wherever we want. So one option is to put that into the Forklift inventory. That's exactly the same mechanism we had for migration analytics, by the way. And with that information, we have another picture of the VM, not just the CPU, memory, disk, okay, the envelope, but we know exactly what's inside of the VM. The current proof of concept has been extended by Peter McGowan. So the guys from the Manage IQ CloudForms community know him very well. So he's done a great job to make it run inside OpenShift instead of just Kubernetes, instead of just Podman from my machine. And with all that information, what we're looking at is making the right decision. If we find some application running in the VM that is fit for a refactor, we may propose to go through Tackle instead of Forklift, because Forklift might not be the best way to handle that VM. It's an easy way. You can still migrate any VM into another VM, but there's a potential that the application is fit for containerization and modernization through Tackle. So that's kind of the goal.
So
cool, thanks.
Any comment, James, or anyone else? Do you think this is aligned with what we want to do?
I just have a comment that, hi, it's Peter McGowan. It raises the question about, as Fabian said, where we're going to store the data. And when I was adapting Fabian's original VM Analyzer code, I got it when it's running in OpenShift, it's interacting with the Forklift database to pull out some of the inventory details. And it kind of makes sense to save the results back into the Forklift database. But then that kind of raises a bigger question: is should Tackle or MTA be using a common database so that they can also access the same discovered attributes? If we're introspecting VMs, that's obviously of more use than just Forklift. So that's perhaps a bigger question: is do we want to start looking at a shared database for all of the conveyor applications?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if we want to draw hard dependencies on integration for sure yet, but I'd be interested in, like, you know, Ramon's thinking around this too, and Marco's and others, and anybody else.
Yeah, if not, at least a data model. Yeah, so I want to give this a try. So Peter, I may ping you to be able to go through it. Okay, I'll move on. A question that came from friends from the OpenShift virtualization team. So would we be able to migrate and automatically configure GPUs on GPU-enabled VMs? So there's already some support in KubeVirt, container native virtualization. They're working on it. So the target platform could do it. The source platform could do it. So this is like, could we be able to do it? This is going to raise like quite a lot of questions when it comes to how to engineer this, right? And especially how to make some changes to VMs when they have some specific features. So this is something that, again, open for discussion. It just arrived very early, this question. I wanted to bring it here. So if you have any comments on this, I would like to hear them. If you want to extend the discussion later on, I will love to do so. So if you have any preliminary comments, I would appreciate that you share them. What do you think about this?
I think it's kind of the same topic as SRIOV or new mapping, like usually prevent the VM from moving. So the main issue we see in CNV is for updates. Because when you're doing an update, you need to drain the, well, in OpenShift more globally, when you're doing an update, you need to drain the node. But if the VM is pinned to a node, you cannot do the upgrade. So there's a policy to actually shut down the VM, which means you need a real maintenance window for updates. And they come very often. So I think it's one of the concerns of a lot of customers. How do we follow the update train with these kind of features enabled? But it's beyond just GPU. It's anything that is tied to the host hardware.
To the VM, yeah. Sorry, I'm not letting you talk. Please go on.
No, that was just something
Okay,
to keep in mind.
Yeah, that concern I think should be addressed by the KubeVirt team and by the OpenShift virtualization team that they're working on this. But when it comes to migrating, I mean, what I'm reading from what you're saying is that there's not such a big issue to try to implement a way to migrate a VM that is GPU enabled and put it as GPU enabled in the target. Do you see that as an issue?
No, it's not an issue. From a technical point of view, we need to identify the GPU that is assigned to the VM on the VMware side, or the ref side, for what it stands. Then translate the configuration into KubeVirt attributes for the VM. So it's more a matter of getting a generic translation using a given pattern that is quite safe, and then potentially allowing the user to customize it at the plan level, like changing the CPU and memory. It can be cumbersome, but some customers will want it. So the same, if we have great defaults, the user may not want to change it, but some of them, advanced user will be able to. You shouldn't close that door. Apart from that, it's like SRIOV. You've got SRIOV enabled on one side. You need to pick a network with SRIOV enabled on the other side and apply almost the same configuration or the closest configuration possible.
Noted. Okay. And then moving to long term, and this is beyond. Okay, so we'll be like, okay, 2022, like mid 2022, beyond. So what are we going to do after 2.3? So this conversation about OpenStack and the fact about being able to migrate many objects from OpenStack, so virtual machines, of course, but the images too, also the volumes, being able even to pivot a volume, to assign networks, and a load balancer could be assigned as a root, and also projects. If we have a project in OpenStack, would we create a project for it in OpenShift virtualization or KubeVirt? So, and then consider optimization as as we said, like storage swing. If you have some storage attached to a VM in OpenStack, would you be able to swing it to OpenShift without having to copy the data in that storage? So this goes a lot beyond the typical migration of single VMs, from A to B. This is a lot about reconstructing the virtual infrastructure that is built on the source and rebuilding in the target. So I think this is something to be considered, and of course we will reach. It's not that we have to. We'll be happy to reach our friends in the OpenStack team and talk to them about this. Any comments from you? Do you think that customers that have like a full project would like to migrate the full project with all this automatically to OpenShift, or would they prefer to go VM by VM and check what is being rebuilt and how? Okay, I mean,
So
go.
This is for long term, right, Miguel?
Yes, long term.
Okay. I'm guessing we should probably, if we're doing quarterly planning, this is probably something we should, I'm guessing we'll have more feedback on next time, right?
Yeah, what I'm asking here is like, if somebody has feedback, please say it now. I mean, you'll have plenty of opportunities to say it, because it's like 1 year from now that we'll be able to think about implementing some of these features. But anyway, I mean, we're here to listen to you. So also some of the things we are considering, like, okay, could we have like a migration playbooks catalog in Ansible Galaxy? Playbooks for most common use cases, and some of them being maintained, like doing some reconfiguration of F5 or info blocks changes in the Ansible catalog. So these are all the things that we are considering, like, hey, how we can provide very good examples and even reusable playbooks that could work for some cases. And then this is like doing more about the integration, bridging Opal with VM introspection. So we could see workloads in when you're selecting the VMs, when you're seeing all the VMs, the VM list, being able to see which workload is was detected for each VM, and design a data model for the how the workloads are going to be defined, extend inventory, and try to, again, bridge Forklift with Tackle. So we could, for example, inject, if we can find, let's say, an application server, and we could find the applications that are deployed there, we could inject that into the application inventory in Tackle. So these are things that we could do, and if we make them in good components, it could be even reused. And one thing that has been mentioned in some conversations is about, being able to do a configuration of the network in the target platform. So if you have, let's say, a VMware cluster, and you can deep dive, you could gather the information on the discovery of the VLANs that are attached, and you could regenerate it in the target, So again, we can extend the inventory with deep dive. We could write a translator to translate this discovered network from VMware into Kubernetes, like with the node network configuration policy and network attachment definition. So we could, again, you have like 200 VLANs assigned to networks in your VMware environment. If we could regenerate them in the target, could be useful. So something to be considered with the KubeVirt team, something we could talk to them, because it will require quite some effort from them too. And but it's something that we heard, like, hey, this could really ease a lot the migrations, especially for customers that have a very simple OpenShift deployment that is not so integrated into the network infrastructure. And what we talked about before, disk optimization, some overutilization in disk reported as an issue by our friends in IBM DBS. So being able to right-size them provides them an incentive for migration. However, what is the drawback? What is the effort? What are the risks? And also being able to import golden images for both VMs and containers is seen as something very useful, like customers that have quite a large number of golden images for different tasks and that they reuse them. It could be great to have them both as VMs and containers. Again, do you think we're missing anything? This is a slide. You can get like the sticky notes in Miro and put them here. Like, what do you think are we missing? So make your proposals. If you think about it later on and you are like, hey, I would have liked to say this, feel free to send an email. I mean, or go to the Slack channel and ping us and say, hey. So we're open to listen to proposals, to consider them and to add them to our list of proposals that will be considered for, of course, to be built into the tool. Join the Conveyor community. If you haven't done it, go to conveyor.io. There's a mailing list in Google Groups. There's a mailing list. Google Groups that you could join. That is Forklift Dev. So if you are not here already, please. Oh, sorry, didn't copy the right one. Copy. Oh my God, you can do it. Copy paste. There we are. Okay, so pasted in both places. So join the mailing list for Forklift, and I mean, we're going to bring more content there on what we have. And we're right on time. It's 5 o'clock. So thank you, everyone. Any last comment from you?
Thanks, Miguel. Thanks, everybody. I was curious, are you guys going to start doing like sprint reviews and sprint demos and publishing them on the dev list?
Well, there's a weekly update. One of the things I would like to do is to bring some of the content of the weekly update. Of course, whatever is about customers has to be between customers and ourselves. But whatever can be shared, I think I'll start sending the weekly update to Forklift Dev, so people could know where we are and about doing sprint reviews in the open. I mean, it's not something we are discarding or consider. It's like, okay, yes, we could do it, of course, but it's like, again, maybe we should start taking that step instead of waiting for people to ask for joining them. So, yeah.
Definitely.
So the good thing is that
I think it would definitely spur some questions if you actually publish the sprint reviews there. More people will get, and they could respond on there. Right?
Yeah. Also, the field input is going to be critical. I mean, the early access program, I'm personally putting a lot of effort, and our colleagues are putting a lot of effort into making the early access program happen, so we could reach real world scenarios and gather feedback directly from people who are considering which VMs shall I migrate, how do I migrate them, how do I automate this or that. So,
cool.
Yeah. Okay.
I just realized our next session is on a different bridge.